Welcome to today's webinar titled When a Parent Deploys Ages 2 to 5. We are thrilled to have Paul Hansel with us today. Paul served in the United States Army Reserves as a combat medic for 14 years and was activated twice to train combat soldiers in medical skills. His father was an officer in the Air Force, and he and his three brothers lived all over the U.S. and had one stint overseas. Paul has a master's in counseling with specialties in neuro-linguistic programming and short-term counseling. Without further delay, I will turn things over to our presenter, Paul Hansel.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Paul Hansel, and I served in the United States Army Reserve for 14 years and was activated twice. I'm also a military brat, and my father had been activated probably 5 or 6 times. It's been quite a few years, so I'm not sure if I remember the number exactly correct. So I know what it's like to be a soldier leaving a wife and children and the stressors that go with that, and I also know what it's like to be a child where dad went away 4 or 5 times in regards to that. So today we're going to be talking specifically about deployment of service members and the effects and how to help children from ages 2 to 5. One of the things that I do want to just point out to you is I have a little bit of a bad cough today. So if I disappear, I will just coughing, and I promise to come back. As always, we review our disclaimer. The appearance of hyperlink does not constitute endorsement by the Department of Defense of this website or the information, products, or services contained therein. For other than authorized activities such as military exchanges and morale, welfare, and recreation sites, the Department of Defense does not exercise any editorial control over the information you may find at these locations. Such links are provided consistent with the stated purpose of the Department of Defense sponsored webinar. So today, our agenda is we'll go under just developmental issues of children from 2 to 5, common stress reactions to deployment children might experience, preparing young children for deployment, talking with your child about those deployments, preparing the child for separation, ways to help children cope, and coping strategies for the caregivers themselves. So the fastest growth of period for a child is between 0 and 2. The second fastest growth period is probably between 2 and 5. It kind of depends on how you break it out. So a 2-year-old to 5-year-old can go very quickly from a clumsy toddler into a hyperactive explorer of their world. And they can vary greatly in their skills and ability. So typically, the typical 2-year-old will speak about 50 words. They'll say things like eat, food, potty, no. No is very popular for a 2-year-old. I know many parents try not to say no because they know that they'll go through a very long period. You can ask the child, would you like ice cream? And they'll yell no, and then, take the ice cream from you right at the same time. Then a child up to 5 years old has very strong word skills and can speak up to oftentimes 1,000 words. And they can say very complex sentences like, she hurt my feelings when she did not share with me. So, children can vary along this spectrum. And sometimes children will become very verbal earlier, or sometimes children can be delayed. And most of the time, for most children, this isn't a worry at all. So if your 4-year-old is not speaking very clearly good concepts or long sentences, people tend to worry. But I tend to remind people they're probably not going to be 22 years old and speaking in the same way. So we don't need to worry about it. Children tend to grow on their own. One of the other factors about children is they don't have a great concept of time. And in fact, time can just have no relevance whatsoever. And so that's one of those learning processes that we can begin to implement in regards to it. And sometimes a minute, sitting in time out for a minute, it just seems like forever. And then when we put into the factor that, dad's going to be away for 8 months or mom's going to be away for, a year and a half, there's just no frame of reference in regards to that whatsoever. And so we want to start to try to help them develop that. Also, children have a strong sense of abandonment issues and are very prevalent. Now, this tends to be more true with 2- and 3-year-olds. Not true for every 2 or 3-year-olds, but tends to be more true for every 2 or 3-year-olds. And then 5-year-olds tend to want to, go around the block without mom, even though they've been told, you're not allowed to go around the block, or you're not allowed to leave the yard without a parent coming with you. So this can be really strong feelings of abandonment for the child when mom or dad, as the service member, goes away for an extended period of time. Also, children enjoy lots of repetition in the ages of 2 to 3 to 4. I have spent many a time of picking up a toy, putting it in somebody's tray, and then the child throws it on the ground, thinks it's a grand time, and after about the 40th time, I'm a little bored with the activity, but they are still extremely excited about it. The one thing that you can say about this repetitive behavior that they tend to enjoy is it's free entertainment. It doesn't cost you anything. As your children get older, of course, entertainment becomes a little bit more expensive in regards to those things. But children also need lots of repetition to get concepts that you want them to understand, like time, where is daddy, why does daddy have to be away, what's mom's job in regards to it. So we want to keep these developmental issues in mind as we go through the next slides. So common stress reactions to deployment. So when mom or dad goes, there we go, common stress reactions to deployment, and we see these typically over and over again. Regressive behaviors such as bedwetting, baby talk, or asking for a bottle. And so if you want to know the concept of why children are beginning this behavior, being a baby and being terribly, constantly cared for and nurtured and hugged and cuddled is a very, very strong positive sensation for the children. And so when all of a sudden their world becomes scary because their mom or dad are away deployed, they might want to revert back to being a baby. Instead of having all that freedom where they can go around, they might want to be held close and tight, and they want to recreate that positive feeling that they had. So they might ask for a bottle. I've seen children ask to be breastfed by their mother again, even though mom hasn't breastfed in 2 or 3 years. They might revert to baby talk, especially if they have younger children who they see are doing this and getting a certain type of attention that they need. Also, bedwetting can be common even when a child has learned not to do it because they're kind of regressing back due to the stress in regards to it. The child can be fearful. Now, it's really great if you have a very verbal child and they express their feelings very easily and they discuss their feelings of being afraid. That is very easy for the parent to kind of address and kind of help the child through. Oftentimes, though, many children don't have that ability to really discuss and direct their talk about their feelings. And so that's why as parents we want to try to model the behavior for them. We can talk about our feelings, or when we have a perception that the child is feeling angry or fearful, we can then discuss it with them and say, it sounds like you're feeling fearful in regards to it. Of course, these build neural patterns in the brain, and then the child begins to learn to associate how to speak with the certain feelings that they have in regards to it. We also see a lot of clinging to the caretaker. Instead of wanting to go out and play in the park with other people, they'll want to stay close to mom. Think about this. Mom has gone away or Dad has gone away, and now you want me to go play out in the park. The park is very big. What if you disappear also? So now I don't really want to go out and play in the park with the other children. I want to hang next to you and might even cling on to you. Uncontrollable crying. Oftentimes when children are not able to verbalize their feelings, it comes out in just good old crying. So when I was deployed, I had 3 children, and they were 6, 4, and 2. And all my children were highly, highly verbal. And my wife said to me, I'd been gone for maybe about 3 or 4 weeks. They had done a lot of talking about what was going to happen and set expectations. They did some fun activities. And everything, and it was a particular Saturday, everybody was having lots of fun. And they were sitting down at the table and talking and laughing. And then all of a sudden, my 2-year-old stood up on the dining room table chair, which, by the way, we are not allowed to stand on the dining room table chairs. She stood up and she just started wailing, crying, and said, "I miss Daddy." My wife told me there was no lead up. There was no discussion of "I miss Daddy." She had no idea that she was even thinking. She thought everybody was well adjusted and just doing really well with it and wasn't even thinking about it. And here my daughter, hadn't really gone to the place where she was ready to express it, and then it just all came forward at once. The next one, which I think is probably one of the more difficult ones to deal with, is the ongoing irritability, which oftentimes leads to acting out. It's just difficult even with adults to be around coworkers or family members who are irritable. Then you have a child who's not really able to express their thoughts or feelings, and they haven't gotten to the crying stage, and so they're just grouchy. No matter what you say or do or try to help with, even things that typically the child might enjoy, they just find that they're just irritable. And then this can lead to acting out behaviors. A common one that's often found in my family with my younger children is wanting to bother their brothers and sisters. It can be quite fun to see how long it takes or how quickly you can get one of your brothers or sisters to scream or get mad or cry. Of course, there's types of behavior of throwing things, breaking things, just the obstinate, I'm not going to do what you say, I don't want to go to bed, no, in regards to it. We do want to keep eye on behaviors and take serious any kind of acting out behaviors that could put the child in danger, any type of cutting behavior, throwing themselves in a dangerous way, going for utensils like knives that might hurt themselves. And, we always want to take a very good view of those things and make sure that we're paying attention to those and get the child the appropriate appropriate help. Also, we can see changes in appetite and sleep patterns. The child just isn't eating as much. Common even among adults who are stressed, they might not eat. If you're like me, I do the opposite. I wish I was one that didn't eat when I was stressed. I'm the opposite. I tend to eat more. You might find the children might have a larger appetite or want more kind of desserty food in regards to it. And the tough one on parents is when children are not sleeping in a normal way. If you're like me, I need my 8 hours of sleep. Anything less is doable, but kind of detrimental to the next day progress and my happiness. And sometimes when the parent is stressed and not real happy, even though they're not behaving badly towards the children will pick up on that tension that the parent is feeling. Another thing that's not listed here is children who are very verbal can express negotiating tactics. One of the children I worked with, Mom, said Dad really had an emphasis on picking up after themselves. And Dad had been deployed. And Dad would say every once in a while when he was communicating with the family, make sure that you pick up after yourself, put away your toys, help your mom. And the son said to Mom, I'm going to make sure that I put away all my toys. Then Dad can come back home early. So here was kind of an imaginative kind of thinking that just wasn't based in reality. And the child felt like, if I could actually keep up cleaning and putting things away, then Dad will come back home. So the pre-separation period, there's quite a bit of study on the pre-separation period and how it is stressful for parents and children. And real quickly on a side note, they have noticed that oftentimes right before a deployment of a spouse, the spouse and the service member will actually do things that will cause tension in the relationship. And they tend to have arguments more. They tend to have less positive communication. They tend to also not work on issues that they might have worked on before. So they tend to start focusing on, do you have the credit card? Do you have the orders? Do you know who's going to pick up the child for daycare? And instead of talking about those things that they normally might, their relationship, how they're going to maintain the relationship, they actually will discuss those things less. One of the theories is separation is painful, and so they are doing a kind of pre-separation dance where they're minimizing the positive affect that is going on, because subconsciously we think that it might make the pain less when the separation happens. Now, I don't know about you, but my wife and I could be having tension or an argument, and we never really argued in front of the children. And even though we were not arguing in front of the children and we both were unhappy with the other, the children would pick up on that, and then they would tend to act out more. And I do believe that children in a subconscious way pick up on parents' moods and difficulties and stressors that they're having, and this can affect the child. So those pre-separation difficulties and withdrawing that the parents are doing can actually affect the child. So the more likely the parent is able to be calm and in a pleasant place, it'll help the child in regards to that. Then all of a sudden, the parents are doing pre-separations with the child. They're having explanations and explaining things, and the child, hears a lot of words depending on their age range, but they don't have a full understanding of the concept, and so really it comes out to, Dad's leaving, it's going to be bad, and that can cause the child anxiety. And that's why we'll go over in a little while. We really want to have repetitive messages. Also, this lack of understanding of why the parent must leave can be very difficult. Oftentimes children will say, why? Why does Daddy have to? Well, why is Daddy in the Army? Why is Mommy going over to help people in Iraq? And there's really no satisfying answer in regards to that. So what can help? So we want you to talk in a calm and reassuring manner with the children. One of the things that you want to do as you're talking with them is you want to be open and honest and talk on a level that they will understand. So again, that comes down to, where is your child able to conceptualize more topics of thoughts and feelings and activities in regards to it. So one example is I had a 4-year-old, one of my children, when he was 4, he just really didn't like to speak very much. And when he had a bad feeling in regards to things, he, instead of, saying, I don't like that, don't do that, you're making me mad, he would, kind of grunt at us, we didn't really think that was great developmentally. We didn't really want him going into kindergarten, grunting at his teachers and fellow students. We thought that might be viewed poorly. And then my oldest child, Paul, he was highly verbal and had very strong concepts. One time we were in church, and he very enthusiastically pushed the kitchen door in the church open and it went swinging, and it hit a ladder, and the ladder fell, and it made a really loud noise. And I really wasn't chastising my son, but I said, "Oh, Paul, that was so loud." And he looked at me, and remember, he was 3. He looked at me, and he said, "Dad, your tone made me feel shame." I was absolutely floored. I knew he was very verbal, but I had no idea he knew what the word shame meant. So I was able to talk a little bit more in depth with him. But just a real simple steps when you're talking openly and honestly, calm way, reassuring the child that, acknowledge their feeling. So if they say or appear that they're irritable or sad, just acknowledge the feeling. It looks like you're feeling really sad. Then I recommend that you identify with them. I'm sad too that Mom is away. And then I suggest that you transfer into future orientation. So I'm really excited about the fact that Mom is coming home for R&R in December. So again, I'll just review it. Johnny, I see that you're feeling really sad about Dad's being away. I miss Dad too, and I feel sad. Won't it be exciting on Saturday when we're able to Skype with him? Does this solve the problem magically? No. Does this make all the children's feelings go away? No. But feeling heard, feeling like someone's coming alongside you and joining you where you are in your pain is a very soothing and simple activity that can help children. So what do you say? Well, we can break this down into pre-deployment and while the person is deployed, okay? In pre-deployment, you can say things like, "Kate, Dad has a job with the military. He's going to help the people in Iraq. This is part of his job. We're very proud of him. He's going to be going away for a while. This has nothing to do with me or you." And depending on the age, you can say a year. If they have a concept, you can just say it's very long time. They also recommend that if the child starts, and I wouldn't go in this direction unless the child kind of brings it up. Well, what is he doing there? We want to avoid anything like, he's killing people or she's shooting the bad guys. We don't want to go into any direction like that. It's too inappropriate for children between 2 or 5. But you certainly could say things like, "Oh, he protects America," or he's going to help women and children in the medical field, or they're going to build bridges, or they're going to, if you have a boy, they're going to blow up buildings that are in the way, kind of, to make things kind of exciting for them. I would also take the opportunity, to do a little bit of a career talk. This is Dad's job. He's highly trained to do it, okay? Don't take trained as in an opportunity to discuss he's trained, he's going to be safe, nothing bad is going to happen. We don't really even want to introduce that something bad will happen with Dad going away or Mom going away to war, okay? Then the other option is to discuss things that are going to be different around home. So Mom's not going to be here anymore. She's going to be away for 12 months. And so Grandma is going to cook on Mondays and Wednesdays and Fridays. And on Tuesdays and Thursdays, Dad is going to take us out for pizza, something like that. So what other changes that might need to happen? Roles and routines. Who's going to wake the child up? Who will be taking them to school? So perhaps Dad was the one that dropped them off at school, and now that Dad is away, the neighbor is going to be participating in helping get the child to school or preschool, so we want to make sure. Also, we really want to reinforce the emotional bond, and I can't say that you can do this too much. The child asks about Dad. What do you think Dad is doing? Oh, Dad is in Syria. He's helping service members do their job. I know that he misses you so much. Last night when I spoke, he said, make sure that I told you that he loves you. So reinforce that emotional bond over and over and over again. And, of course, that can be done through telephone calls directly from the service member, Skype videos, and also letters. Children really love letters. I would, when I was deployed, I would draw pictures because my children weren't really interested in my day-to-day activities like my wife would be, or my thoughts and feelings about my NCO who was either difficult or did a great thing. So I would draw pictures, and I would do simple sentences like what I ate or what fun activity I was able to do. So, today Dad was able to choose from pizza or spaghetti. He took spaghetti, and after he ate spaghetti, he went with his friends to the barracks and shot pool. Real simple, kind of paints a picture for the children in a positive light. Pre-deployment, you want to help the child plan for departure. So that would be telling them about it, maybe doing a countdown to the day when Dad will leave. And then my parents with me would plan certain activities, like, Dad's going to take you out one night by yourself so you and him can have special time at dinner, and then you might go and see a movie, and then as a family, we're going to have a picnic with the unit team, and so they would have it and they would break these down. So it wasn't a shock and as a surprise. Now, I have heard certain parents say to me that their children do not do well with long periods of time and explaining things before. So I do think if, as you get to know your child, you might discover, telling them 3 weeks in advance just causes them a tremendous amount of stress and anxiety. So you kind of have to balance that. You don't want too much time where it causes your child stress and anxiety, or too short of a time where, like, Dad's getting on a plane in 3 hours, you're not going to see him for a year. That might be too much. So you'd have to, kind of study your child, listen to your child, know your child, and figure out what would be a best solution for you all. One of the times when my dad was deployed, I think they told me like 3 days before, but I was pretty young. And then later on, when I was older, they gave me a kind of a 6 months notice. I'm not really sure I had a concept even when I was like 8 years old on what that concept of what was going to happen in 6 months. By that time, I was so used to my father being deployed or away for periods of time. Of course, when you're much younger, you're not used to that whatsoever. You're used to the daily activities of Dad coming home, Mom coming home, and participating in dinner or activities or bath time. And so those things can cause the child separation anxiety. So they do recommend that a method of measuring the passage of time. We really liked putting X's on calendars. And when I was deployed stateside, we had the financial ability for my wife and children to come visit us in Texas 3 times during my year of deployment to Texas. So we would do kind of a blue circle for the day that they were going to get on the airplane and fly to Texas, and they would do X's up to it. You can do countdown to numbers. 2-year-olds and 3-year-olds don't typically have a good concept of numbers. I don't emphasize this too much. It's just kind of something that you can do that constantly puts in the child's mind that you're going to be reconnected. That's what's more important. You're going to be reconnected, not so much as 2 weeks, 3 months, 4 days. One of the things they also recommend is that the parent send pictures about their day-to-day life, like where they work, where they sleep. We are so blessed in our time that many people are communicating with their children and their spouses via Skype. And, I've talked to a service member, and they talk to their spouse and children every day on Skype. So kind of a funny story. So the first time I was deployed, I really wanted to stay connected with my children. I was going to be gone for a year and 3 months. I was gone for 3 months, and then I came back, and then it's going to be gone for another year, and I really wanted to stay connected. And so we got a new computer, and it had the camera capability, and we used some program, maybe it was Skype, where we could see each other. Well, the first time, it was so exciting. They loved it, but they really loved seeing themselves on the camera, because with Skype, you can have the picture of the person and then what you look like. And so we learned that they were so entertained by themselves. So the next time we did Skype, maybe 2 or 3 days later, we turned off the picture where they couldn't see themselves. And so then it was just kind of fun watching Dad on TV. And they'd ask me to do funny things, and I would do funny things, and very, very positive. Well, the third time, they really weren't interested. The excitement dropped significantly. And then the fourth time that I thought, I need to do something, so I thought, I'll read them books. That didn't go over well. My children just had no interest in really participating a whole lot with me on Skype. I'm not sure why. Even to this day, all 3 of my children don't really like to talk on the phone. That doesn't come from my side of the family. I'm pretty sure that comes from my wife's side of the family. And so what we implemented was 2 or 3 times a week, my wife and I would talk on Skype, and we would make sure that we would do this with the children in the room. They were required to come over and at least say hi to Dad, and then I might tell them a poem or a funny joke. And then they were released, but they would stay in the room, and so my wife and I would talk about things that were appropriate for the children to hear, and we would kind of have our relating time then. And, it would be like my wife and I having a conversation in the room. We didn't really try to force, your dad's on Skype, he's been away, pay attention to him, be nice to him. We didn't want it to be negative. They certainly loved receiving letters and cards from me, and parents can help them write letters, draw pictures, and send it to the service member who is away. Very, very important for the service member to say, wow, I was so happy to receive your letter. What a wonderful picture. Very important, don't forget to acknowledge it, because, writing letters, drawing a picture for a child, that is a real task for them. They've worked hard, and they've put their soul and their heart into it, and to not acknowledge it is a lost opportunity to build rapport with them. The parent that does stay would be highly encouraged to talk about the deployed parent frequently, what you miss about them, how good Dad or Mom was good at making dinner or fixing things, to bring them up in casual conversation. There tends to be a tendency of sadness in the beginning, but then everyone kind of gets in a routine, and you don't want a lack of rapport to continue to be strong between the service member away and the child that's still there. So we want to provide lots of reassuring repetition, especially for like 2-year-olds and 3-year-olds, perhaps 4-year-olds, perhaps 5-year-olds. 4 and 5-year-olds can be significantly different between 2 and 3-year-olds. We're going to make it through this. Dad still loves you. Wouldn't it be great when we are able to get back with them? So just repeat those things. Some parents have recorded their child's favorite books, which can be really great for the parent who stays home. If you've ever had a child ask you to read a book, the same book 13 times in a row, it might be nice to have a MP3 recording of the book that can be actually played. Saves the parent's voice. We can encourage them to draw, paint, and play. Painting, and playing for 2 to 5-year-olds It's not just a fun activity. This is their work. This is their development. They actually can express feelings and resolve issues from drawing, painting, and playing. And the more that the parent participates with them and encourages them, the better the rapport for the child with the parent who stays, but also the better the child is able to work through thoughts and feelings. And of course, between 2 and 5, most children love lots of hugs and cuddles. Some children, around 4 or 5, become more independent, and they want the hugs and cuddles on their terms when they're ready for them. And, that can, be needed immediately or stopped abruptly. Very, very important that we maintain a regular routine with your child. It might be a different routine that you had when the spouse was there, but now that the spouse is deployed, you want to set a new routine, communicate that with the child, and do that regularly. This is just common knowledge that children between 2 and 5 need regular routine. Turn on your sensors. Really, really begin to pay attention and listen to what the child might not be saying. Okay? If the child is irritable and is not able to be putting it into words, and then they draw a picture of the service member, mom or dad, and they put an X through them, they might be angry that dad or mom is away. And then you can turn on your sensors, pay attention to those things, and help the child process through that. Definitely do not want 2 to 5-year-olds watching anything on the media news coverage about death, dying, destruction, shooting people, just not age appropriate for children to really begin to try to internalize and work through these things. Most children will not have a concept of it, and they'll just pick up the stress from it and have no way to manage it. Be consistent with discipline, which can be difficult at times, especially when, we want to be kind of gracious and loving. Sometimes being setting firm boundaries is the gracious, loving thing to do with the child. Children who do not have the appropriate amount of boundaries oftentimes feel out of control, like they're supposed to be in control but feel out of control. And when we set those appropriate boundaries and with discipline, children are often happier. Taking care of yourself. I do want to emphasize this. Children, psychically or subconsciously, I'm not sure how you'd like to say it, they pick up on our stress. They know when mom or dad is unhappy or stressed or not working through something. And I've seen it with my children. I didn't say anything about work, and I come in and, I say, "Hi, how is everyone?" And then my wife says something to me, and then I say, "No, I can't do that," in kind of a harsh tone. And one of my children turned and say, "Dad, did you have a bad day at work?" They pick up on those things. So it's very important that we take care of ourselves, that we rest, that we recover from our stressors so our stress is not picked up by the child and causes them more stress. Lots of ways to do it. Take a bath, see a movie, go out with friends, put the children to bed early and close the door and just have me time, whatever that looks like for you. Oftentimes family members, grandma and grandpa, cousins, they are lots of fun. So if you feel overwhelmed and you need time to take care of yourself, accept help from family or friends who are positive in your life and in the children's life. You don't want to bring, mom or sister over or brother or uncle over who is causing more problems and more stress, but don't feel guilty that, they're taking time to relate with their grandchildren or relate to their children, relatives. Allow that to happen. Allow yourself to take time. There's also various ways where you can get connected, and I think women are a little better at doing this than male spouses. my experience, the women tend to get together and really support each other. Men do it too, but not as much. So there are different types of organizations that help spouses that stay back. So any organizations in your military or civilian community can be helpful. So in conclusion, there are some simple steps that you can do to help young children cope with the deployment of a loved one. And here I just want to really emphasize acknowledging the child's feeling, identifying with the child's feeling, and then going to future orientation. And again, I'm just going to give you an example. Seems like you're really sad, Sarah, that Dad is away. I'm sad too. I'm looking forward to when he can come home. Real important to be aware of developmental issues and needs of the child. We kind of reviewed those. Do keep in mind between 2 and 5, children can vary in ability to understand concepts, ability to communicate, and ability to have a connection and able to verbalize their feelings. Prepare for the deployment when possible. Make a decision how soon before the deployment you want to let the children know about it. Make some significant steps and gestures where the children can participate with the with the service member, so they know, they get a sense of a kind of interaction timing before the spouse leaves. Utilize coping strategies that help both the child and the caregiver. And finally, taking care of yourself is very important. You can't give what you don't have. If you have spent all the money in your emotional bank, your energy bank, you have no more money to spend emotionally or energy-wise. And our children, especially 2 to 5, take a lot of emotional and energy to care for. So make sure that you take care of yourself. Any questions at this time?
Paul, we do have some questions that have come in. The first question reads, how do you explain to a 3-year-old that his dad has to leave for his first deployment when they may not even understand the word deployment?
Great question. You go to a really simple concept of Dad's going bye-bye for work. And I'm assuming that, Dad goes away to work on a regular basis. I'm assuming that the child has a concept of bye-bye or going away. So you just, let Dad, and this is where you would repeat the behavior. Daddy's going bye-bye for a few hours, and Daddy's come home. Daddy's going to go bye-bye for a long time. And there's not a whole lot more, and we don't want to, not a whole lot more that we can really implement into a child who doesn't have that cognitive understanding. And we should let ourselves off the hook of we have to explain it more when the child is just not capable in regards to doing it. You could also add feelings. If you see the child having feelings, I would be a little careful of interjecting, Dad's going bye-bye, Mommy's now sad. If the child isn't sad and doesn't have a concept he or she should be sad, so I would hold off on doing that, but just repetitively discussing that. Sometimes parents pull out maps and say, they point to Virginia where we live, Daddy's going bye-bye over here, and drawing a line. Good question.
Okay, thanks. Next question reads, if a child is anxious or worried about safety, theirs or deployed parent, at what age is it a good idea to empower them with teaching them self-defense techniques?
I would say I wouldn't really implement this at 2 or 3. 4-year-olds and 5-year-olds, it could be possible. It just depends on the culture that you're growing up. Your child's growing up, the neighborhood. What kind of discussions does the family have? It would not have been appropriate from 2 to 5 for me to have talked with my children in regards to defense techniques. And in fact, we were kind of the opposite. We were implementing turn the other cheek, be kind, those kind of things. But if your child is a 5-year-old or a 4-year-old and has very strong concepts about people being attacked and being hurt, then you would begin to discuss at that child's level. I'm not so sure about having discussions with the child about how they would protect themselves, but maybe simple discussions about Daddy is trained to protect himself. Daddy wears armor to protect himself. Again, I would not bring this up unless the child has a concept of it and they're bringing it up.
Okay, great. Next question reads, is it best to tell your child or children as soon as you know about the service member's deployment?
I'm not so sure there's one answer for that. It depends on the maturity of the child and the child's anxious level with separation from the parent. We told one of my children very, very early, the thought was after we told the child, can I have a cookie? No concept whatsoever. And, we told them 3 or 4 months out. If you have a child that has a very strong concept of separation and that's going to cause the child a lot of anxiety, I would not recommend it. You might consider only doing it 3 or 4 days before, and those 3 or 4 days are going to have fun activities for the child to connect. I do think you want to avoid as much as possible just a surprise. Oh, we're going to the airport. We're dropping Daddy off. We're not going to be seeing him for a while. I think you would want to avoid that with most children.
Great. At this time, there are no other questions in the queue. So I would like to thank you, Paul, for sharing your invaluable experience and expertise. I would also like to thank our attendees for attending today's webinar and submitting questions. If you find yourself having questions after the webinar is over, please email moswebinars@militaryonesource.com, and I'll get the questions over to our presenter, and we'll get an answer to you back as soon as we can. Paul does have some resources and references on the screen, so please take a look at those. At this time, this will conclude today's webinar on when a parent deploys ages 2 to 5. Thank you all for attending, and have a great day.